The 2025 NBA trade deadline has been out of control. So many high-profile players, picks, big new contracts, title changing moves. So many things happened, and it's time to recap it all. Beginning, of course, with Luka Doncic to the LA Lakers. It's been a couple of days, and people still can't wrap their mind around this particular move. The Lakers get Luka, Maxi Kleber, and Markieff Morris, and the Mavs get Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 Lakers first-round pick. And all the moves that have been made since still pale in comparison to this move in particular. Now we're getting video of Luka in his Lakers uniform. He's presumably going to be making his debut this Saturday. And in combination with some of the moves that the Lakers have made that we're going to talk about later, they've completely changed their roster over the last couple of days. They've used all the picks that they could have used and now look like they have such a bright future. Everything has changed for the Lakers because of the Luka trade. They're no longer reliant on LeBron and formerly Anthony Davis to try and chase a title. They're no longer reliant on older players. They have this young superstar player that apparently the Mavs no longer wanted. The Mavs were concerned about Luka possibly leaving because of his contract situation. They were concerned about how his conditioning looked. They were concerned about the fact that he didn't play defense. And despite the fact that even with all those things in consideration, they made the finals 8 months ago, they still made the choice to trade him away and get Anthony Davis in return. And no disrespect to Anthony Davis, he was fantastic last year, probably a top 10, top 12 guy in the entire league when he's healthy. And there's no shame in adding Anthony Davis to your team in general. And it's clear that's the guy that the Mavs wanted. They went all in. That's their guy. They feel like him, Kyrie, some of the other moves that they made, that's going to allow them to go out and contend for a title this year, next year, the year after, way better than if Luka was on the team, and they don't have to worry about Anthony Davis possibly leaving. I can understand all of that if the guy you're trading away isn't Luka Doncic. I saw someone the other day refer to him as he's not just a star, he's an icon. He's the core of the Mavs fan base. Everything you've done over the last couple of years since you got him, getting Kyrie, bringing in Daniel Gafford, drafting Derek Lively, PJ Washington, everything was centered around building the team around Luka. And you don't trade away the center of your team, the core of your team, unless that guy asks out. He didn't ask out. They made the move anyway. I don't think I even need to give analysis on whether I like the deal or not. Everybody knows that this was a bad decision for the Dallas Mavericks, unless somehow they go out and win a title this year or next year. They've got Kyrie, they've got Anthony Davis, they've got a couple of other guys. If they're healthy, they're going to be formidable in the postseason. I hope they end up playing the Lakers in the postseason. That would be awesome. But there's just no way you can defend this trade for the Mavs and for the Lakers. Talk about a lifeline. They were an old team that didn't have an outlet to being a contending team over the next couple of seasons in terms of having a young star at the center of it. And now they've got the third, fourth best basketball player in the entire world on their team. And he's just 25 years old. An unbelievable deal for the Lakers. The next deal to talk about, of course, here is De'Aaron Fox to the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs get De'Aaron Fox, Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings get Zach Lavine, the 2025 Charlotte first that won't convey a 2027 Spurs first, a 2031 Minnesota first, and 3 second-round picks. And the Bulls get Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter, Trey Jones, and their own 2025 first-round pick back. And the cool thing about this is we've already seen Fox debut for the Spurs, and I've got a video about that right here. And it's clear that this is going to work. It's going to fit really well. They've needed a perimeter creator, someone like De'Aaron Fox alongside Victor Wembanyama, and they got him, and he wants to be there. They're going to sign him to an extension. It's a fantastic situation for San Antonio to be in. Not to mention the fact they didn't even really have to give up all that much. They still have contracts like Keldon Johnson. They still have a bunch of future firsts, obviously, that are their own, but they also have some Atlanta picks that they didn't have to trade away. Only having to trade away a Charlotte pick that's going to become 2 seconds. So basically, they traded away 2 firsts, one of which was a pick they got for Minnesota, moving up to the 8th pick in the draft and getting Rob Dillingham, and the other was their own 2027 first, and presumably Fox, Wemby, a couple other guys, they're going to be good in 2027. So that's not that big of a deal. An unbelievable deal for San Antonio, and one that pushes them up the Western Conference hierarchy a little bit for this season. Fox is going to be an awesome creator for them. I love the deal for San Antonio. Sacramento, I get why they made the move. It became clear to them, and not on the same level as the Luka thing with the Mavs in terms of the caliber of player, but similar situation. They felt like he was going to leave. They got an indication he was going to leave because he didn't sign the extension with them, so they wanted to move on. It's still not great compensation. De'Aaron Fox is awesome, even with his contract situation, even with him making it clear that he wanted to go to San Antonio, preferably. Only getting 2 future firsts, and then Zach Lavine is just not great in my opinion, because there were times last year where you would have had to attach a first-round pick just to get rid of Zach Lavine and his contract, and if you take that into account, they got like 1 first-round pick in exchange for De'Aaron Fox, which is not great. I don't love the trade for Sacramento, although I understand why they felt like they had to do it, and I actually like the move for Chicago. Not everybody does, but they get their own pick back. It was top 10 protected to San Antonio this year. Now that protection is removed, they just get their own pick, so they're free to be as bad as they want to be the rest of the year. That could end up being a really nice selection for them. And then I think Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter, Porter and Trey Jones collectively could get them something down the road, whether it be something close to a first round pick, couple of seconds. I don't think that's bad value for a guy in Lavine that, yes, is having a really good year, but they've tried to trade for like 2 years and have been unable to because the value just wasn't there. I still really like the move for Chicago. Next is another one that I think is really being overlooked that's going to be super important the rest of the year, and that is Kyle Kuzma to Milwaukee and Chris Middleton going to Washington. The Bucks get Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin, Jericho Sims, and a second-round pick. The Wizards get Chris Middleton, A.J. Johnson, and a 2028 first-round pick swap from Milwaukee, and the Knicks get DeLon Wright and some cash. We're not really going to talk about the Knicks part. For Milwaukee, people really like this move. They're into it. They think that Kyle Kuzma is going to be helpful. Obviously, he was a piece on the Lakers championship team in 2020, and moving on from Chris Middleton is something that a lot of people were into at this point. He's injury prone, he's getting older, and yes, he was the core, a big part of their title run in 2021, but it's just time to move on, in a lot of people's opinion, from Chris Middleton, and Kyle Kuzma provides them positional flexibility as someone that is definitely going to help them defensively more than someone like Chris Middleton. That's what everybody is saying. I'm not that into this move for Milwaukee. I understand that the value of Chris Middleton wasn't necessarily fantastic, and you only have to give up a pick swap, which is probably unlikely to actually be a swap for Washington. And then you have A.J. Johnson, who was a first-round pick, so it's like 1.5 first-round picks, 1.25 first-round picks if you account for the pick swap there. But I'm not a Kyle Kuzma guy. If I'm trying to contend for a title, Kyle Kuzma is not someone that I want to be my third or fourth best player. I know that we literally saw it in 2020 in the bubble, and all he's done over the last couple of years is develop bad non-championship habits in Washington. This is a huge vote of confidence in Kyle Kuzma being a championship contending piece, and he has been as far away from that, or at least as far away from that environment over the last couple of seasons as you could possibly be. I like the lineup flexibility. I like the fact that this got them under the first apron to have some flexibility for some other moves. I understand all of that, but I just would have rather kept Chris Middleton, quite frankly. I would have rather had his contract potentially run out. He has a player option this offseason, then it runs out after that, than have a couple of years of Kyle Kuzma. I understand that it's a cheaper contract, it's cost controlled, and they just didn't want to have to cross their fingers and hope that Chris Middleton was healthy in the postseason. But for me, I don't love the deal for Milwaukee. For Washington, I really like it. I think A.J. Johnson is the kind of guy you want to take a flyer on. He's still super young, and then you get the pick swap. And then Chris Middleton, who's going to stay on the team, you could trade him in the offseason, assuming he opts into a player option. There's still a lot of value potentially that they could get out of someone like Chris Middleton. Maybe a lot is strong, but there's still some value they could get out of Chris Middleton. The only other thing I'll mention here for the Bucks, it is nice they get a little bit more front court help. They get someone like Jericho Sims, and then a second round pick for a little bit of extra flexibility. But I like this deal way better for Washington and less for Milwaukee than it seems like most people do. Then we get to another big one. Of course, I'm telling you, this deadline was crazy. Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors get Jimmy Butler. The Heat get Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, PJ Tucker, and a top 10 protected Warriors 2025 first round pick. This was a deal that took forever to come together. I've probably got 6 or 7 Jimmy Butler videos on the channel over the last couple of months. Once it became clear that he didn't want to be there anymore and he was trying to force his way to Phoenix, the Phoenix thing fell apart. Then Golden State, that reportedly today, there was a deal that would have sent Kevin Durant to Golden State, would have sent Jimmy Butler to Phoenix, and would have sent something similar to this kind of package to Miami. That was a deal that was a real thing, and all it needed was for Kevin Durant to say he would like to go to the Warriors. The Warriors were willing to put in a bunch of stuff and send that to Phoenix, and that ended up not happening. That deal fell apart because Kevin Durant said, I don't want to go to Golden State. They pivoted. They get Jimmy Butler. They're willing to give him the 2-year, 111, 121, whatever it is, $1 million extension, which is a massive number for him, of course. And finally, gave us the resolution that everybody wanted. Everybody wanted to see at some point Jimmy Butler go elsewhere, and he ends up in Golden State. For me, I'm not a huge fan of this deal for the Warriors. I don't think this really changes that much for their team. It's nice that they get some star power alongside Steph. It's clear that that's been a priority for them for a while, going back to Paul George, Lauri Markkanen, of course, going after someone like Kevin Durant. And yes, it's nice they kept some other assets. Kuminga, Podziemski, not part of the deal. They have some other picks as well, but I don't think this really changes anything. Adding Jimmy Butler at this point in his career doesn't make the Warriors a top 3 team in the Western Conference, and Andrew Wiggins was solid for them. Like, it's not like that's nothing. It's not like he was just a complete negative for them. That's going to be a significant loss, especially if Jimmy Butler isn't all that available, which has been a problem for him and one of the reasons Miami didn't want to sign him to the extension in the first place. And not only have you given stuff up, a pick, Wiggins, but also you had to sign Jimmy Butler to the extension just to get this to work, and now you're on the hook for $60 million a year for the next 2 years after this one for 35-year-old Jimmy Butler. Yes, you get him to play alongside Steph. Yes, they're on the same timeline. Maybe you do it for a couple of years. If it doesn't work out, you start trading a couple of guys. I can understand that mindset. the desperation really came through here for Golden State. They were so desperate to make any kind of move, and unfortunately, I just don't think that I would be in the Jimmy Butler business at this point in his career. For Miami, I really like the deal. Getting some kind of a pick out of him is fantastic. If you go back to when Jimmy Butler ended up going to Miami in the first place, that was like Josh Richardson for Jimmy Butler straight up. No picks, no nothing. They're getting Wiggins, who's good, who's helpful, is going to fit perfectly in what they do and in their starting lineup. Couple of potential rotation wings in Kyle Anderson and PJ Tucker. And then you get a top 10 protected pick for Golden State. You're probably going to get that this year. It's probably going to be somewhere in the 15 to 22 range, which is going to be helpful for them. We know that Miami's good at drafting. All of that stuff, I think, is absolutely a positive for Miami. 2 months ago, and told Heat fans that this is what they were going to get for Jimmy Butler, they might not have been that excited, but given how things played out over the last couple of weeks, this is a win for them, in my opinion. But the deadline was not done yet. We've got Brandon Ingram to the Toronto Raptors in a late night deal. The Raptors get Ingram, and the Pelicans get Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a 2026 Indiana first-round pick, and a second-round pick. And the Ingram situation has been overshadowed by all of these stars around the league. Jimmy Butler, we've got Kevin Durant rumors, and we just kind of forgot about the fact that for a year now, the Pelicans have been trying to trade Brandon Ingram. He is a free agent in a couple of months. He's a 2025 free agent, and they've been desperate to try and find him a new home because even though he's good, he's not a great fit with their roster. They've got these really cool wings like Herb Jones, Trey Murphy. Of course, they still have Zion as well. They were unable to find their Brandon Ingram team that was actually going to give them something. And finally, Toronto stepped up and was that team. And I'm sorry, Raptors fans, I don't love the deal. Giving up a draft asset, these are the last couple of pieces of the Pascal Siakam trade. Bruce Brown is just a contract, Kelly Olynyk is just a contract, but you give up the pick just for the right to overpay Brandon Ingram. Like you're looking at paying Brandon Ingram $40-50 million a year potentially. He's good, but in considering where your team is at with the Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, just you're basically trying to recreate what the Chicago Bulls have been for the last 5 or 6 years, and you gave away a pick just for the right to overpay Brandon Ingram. I understand the talent play. Brandon Ingram's very good, but he's one of those guys that's good enough to have the ball a lot, but not good enough to lead you to anything significant in terms of postseason or team success. It's just not a move I would have done if I was Toronto. I would have found somewhere else to send the expiring contracts to maybe get some assets back, maybe take on some contracts for another team. I would have kept the Indiana first. You never know what's going to happen with that team because of Halliburton's like back situation. They could fall apart. I just would rather have the pick than Brandon Ingram. So not surprisingly, I like the deal for New Orleans. Brandon Ingram was likely not going to be on their team in a couple of months. Every team around the league knew they were desperate to get rid of him, to get something for him. They tried for a year to get something, and to get an actual draft asset in exchange is fantastic for them. They get, obviously, expirings, but that doesn't matter because Ingram's probably going to walk. And then you get the first as well. You move on, you solidify your wing rotation. It's so much more clear to everyone now what your plan is moving forward, presuming that Zion continues to be healthy. You've got Trey Murphy, you've got Herb Jones. You don't have to worry anymore about, man, is Brandon Ingram supposed to come off the bench? Is he going to play more than 40 games in a season? You've moved on from the Brandon Ingram business. You get a draft pick. To me, that is absolutely a win. Then we get to one that I'm just going to go and tell you right now, I'm going to be in the contrarian kind of category here. I'm going against what a lot of people think about this deal, and it is Mark Williams to the Lakers. The Lakers get Williams, the Hornets get Dalton Connect, Cam Reddish, a 2030 Lakers pick swap, and a 2031 Lakers unprotected first-round pick. Now, for the Lakers, the concept of this deal is obvious. When they traded away Anthony Davis, they were looking at starting Jackson Hayes at the 5 for the rest of the year, and that's just not something they were willing to do. They probably looked at Clint Capella, Nick Claxton. Apparently, they called on someone like Jalen Duren. They were looking for a 5 because even though they have Luka, and that's very exciting, Luka has not signed an extension yet, and you don't want the beginning of the Luka era to go poorly because you have no rim protection and you don't have a lob threat for him other than someone like Jackson Hayes. So they're aggressive in going out and getting a 5, and in general, Mark Williams is a really good option for them. He's young. He's been fantastic in the games that he's played. He fits well alongside the Luka timeline and rounds out their roster really nicely because they've got wings like someone like Dorian Finney-Smith. Obviously, you have perimeter creators and LeBron and Luka. Now you've got your rim protector and Mark Williams. You've got some decent depth. And now you start to look at this roster and think, hey, maybe they could do some things in the postseason with Luka at the center of it. It creates a very interesting situation for LA. Meanwhile, for Charlotte, Mark Williams, although he's good, is a previous regime kind of guy. The front office has changed, the ownership has changed, and even though he's clearly very good, this was a sell high for them. Mark Williams has been awesome since he's come back this season from injury. You get a couple of picks, or a pick and a swap, I should say. You get another first, basically, because that's what Dalton Connect was not that long ago, and then Cam Reddish, who's just there for the contract. I still really like the move for Charlotte, and I can totally understand why they were willing to move on from him. Now, most people are obsessed with this deal for the Lakers because they love Mark Williams. They see his numbers, they see the stats that he puts up, they see that he's going to continue to improve because he's so young. Here's my problem. I have 2 problems with the Mark Williams thing. One, defensive impact is not necessarily quantifiable right now. And his defensive instincts and his understanding, and quite frankly, his IQ understanding of what to do is not fantastic. Like, yes, he can be a rim protector, but in terms of positional defense, he's all over the place right now. He's played like 100 NBA games. He just does not quite understand how to play on the defensive end of the floor yet. And that makes me nervous for a guy that the Lakers are desperately going to be relying on, and that their backup plan for as of this moment is, again, someone like Jackson Hayes. So it can work defensively, but I would be nervous about just assuming that it will. Then the other thing is, the guy doesn't play. He played like 20 games last year, 40 games as a rookie. He's played 20 games so far this year. He's on pace to play like 45 games. And if you're giving up multiple picks or multiple draft assets and Dalton Connect, I'd rather have someone that I know is going to play. And quite frankly, I'd rather have a guy at more of a premium position than a 5. There are other players around the league, other positions, other roles on my team that I'd rather spend a pick and a half plus Dalton Connect on over a center, and certainly an injury-prone center like Mark Williams. It absolutely can work out for the Lakers, but I'm not as big of a fan of this as other people. And for Charlotte, unsurprisingly, I love the deal. I think Connect's going to be really, really good for them. He wasn't really a fit anymore in LA because of the potential defensive limitations of their perimeter guys like Reeves and Luka and LeBron. Like, you can't then also have Dalton Connect out there. That's just going to be a terrible lineup defensively. And so I understand them getting rid of him, but I think he's going to develop really well and Charlotte be a nice professional scorer for them. And then also the draft compensation. You never know what the 2030 or 2031 Lakers are going to look like. Luka might not even be on the team by that point. He's not signed to a long-term contract. I love the move for Charlotte, and I'm a little bit more down on it for the Lakers. And that wraps up the craziest NBA trade deadline of all time.